how often are things missed in this part, and then they come up
Oh,
later when you're trying to integrate them? Like, oh, we missed this.
all the time, all the
Yeah.
time. And I will say that I mean, usually your technical assessments are pretty thorough. But at the same time, as I was talking, so much about how execution is important to be able to achieve, the strategic outcomes that you want to get to. A lot of that is governance, right? So you can be like, all right, here's our full idea of what we're going to do, and here's our target, and here's every known issue, and here's every known risk, and you're like, there it is. And that doesn't just like stay there at a point in time and never change or move. Like week over week, it's iterating, it's changing, it's moving. And so just having tidy change management, having thoughtful understanding of key decisions and their implications if you decide to take on a risk. And I'm not necessarily talking so much about a security risk, but any kind of risk. What is, if you don't mitigate it, what could happen? And where's your tolerance on that? And then double checking that risk hasn't gotten bigger with its implications getting bigger in the future. So it's a lot of just understanding an entire environment from that people process tech stack and how it impacts the future state, and how things that are happening today constantly are evolving and changing what your current state is. So a lot of moving parts, but just being tidy and aware of where your challenges are is very important.
Do the assessments include like any penetration tests, or is this strictly just? Oh, it does. Okay.
Yeah, I would say like a lot of pen tests and like disaster recovery and things like that are typically pre-merger due diligence. Like you just want to know the outcomes of those, so you know what you're getting into. Or like the latest, PIN and DR that had happened, and getting those results and understanding what were the outcomes of it. In some of the smaller companies that maybe didn't have to do that as routinely because they weren't like ISO certified or something, then, they sometimes have to do it as a part of a pre-due diligence execution.
That makes sense. Is there anything that like you've seen multiple times and you just want people to know if they're going through a merger or an acquisition, like how to make your job easier?
Oh my gosh. I think the biggest one is any company that thinks that they can manage a post-merger integration off the side of their desk. And they think like the leadership team should do it on the side of their desk. Like it's not, it doesn't go well. And then we do a lot of rescue projects, and I should have the math to say this so I can say it properly. I will say 75% of our rescue efforts are because leadership thought that their existing team should do something that significant on the side of their desk. And about the time that it's ready to fail is when they call for help. And so I get the pleasure of getting a super hot mess on my hands with like usually a very short timeline to resolve it, and like not very much money because they ate it all, and high stakes. So I still enjoy jumping in those, but I sure like starting at the beginning when I can control it. But yeah, I think that's definitely the biggest mistake is our technical team's going to do that, and the leader is going to manage that with their existing capacity. And I could just feel it and see it on those team members when you come in. They're just like stressed. They've been working like 10, 12-hour days. They don't know what they're doing, and they're trying to do their real job all day long. So that's definitely the biggest mistake I see.
Is this where like consultants would come in? Like you'd bring in a consultant to try to augment the staff to help with that piece?
Yeah, that's what we do.
Okay. Well, I didn't know. When you were talking about bringing in other ones, I was like, oh, okay, maybe additional helpers.
Yeah, but it's not just like consultants to do it, right? So it's consultants, but it's also like, okay, let's say you have a NetSuite ERP, and it is like, I've worked on some of these, and if you think about a chair, you're like, oh, a chair just goes in the ERP. Some of these entities like break it down, like there's 22 bolts on the chair, and there's like 2 armrests on the chair, and there's a pad on the chair, and there's all these components, and so they break everything down to the smallest pieces. And being able to migrate something like that into another ERP, even if it is a NetSuite, it's just a haul, right? It takes a lot of reconciliation work. It takes a lot of data migration. It takes a lot of validation of how things are set up, and then being able to meet, your future state where it needs to be at. And in those situations, bringing on like a NetSuite, resource as a contractor is probably a good idea, right? Unless you're willing to free up somebody on your bench. and be like, okay, your only job is this. So I think it depends on the size, and a lot of times when we come in to assess mergers, we will look for where those resource constraints are and make recommendations to mitigate them.
What do you think leadership can do more of? And this is, sorry, Mike, this is less security, but I'm just curious. Like, okay, that was
I wrapped
the
you
bad
back
thing.
into my world.
Yeah, that was the bad thing, right? That they need to stop doing. So what would you say leadership in general can do to make these smoother transitions and integrations? Because ultimately it's time and it's money, right? The longer it takes to actually get integrated.
Yeah, I think that it's really important to be thoughtful that that execution component is just as important as the input that they put into the due diligence, because due diligence is really costly. Making sure that you're making the right purchase and that there's the company aligns with where you want to go, and if the product is intended to bolt onto your existing product, that it's feasible, and you've done all of that pre acquisition due diligence. I think the same rigor in ensuring that that purchase is executed properly, and naming your governance structure to make sure, like, okay, that person makes these decisions and they have the authority to make those decisions, and how do we make sure that if anything hits a certain risk trigger, that the right, I'm going to say, decision is made and quickly, so that things don't exhaust and cost a lot of money. So I think a lot of it, and you're going to get that from me, is execution management, right? Just making sure that you're really thoughtful about protecting the investment. And the way I look at it is, like, you don't say, hey, I'm going to buy a new build house, and you invest all the time in doing it, and then just be like, we don't need a general contractor. It'll get put together with all of the contracts, they'll figure it out. It's just not tidy with your investment, right? You want to make sure that it's built the right way, and that it's structured the right way, and the left hand's talking to the right hand, and that the timing is really thoughtful, and somebody's looking 10 miles down the road, not at the windshield.
Okay, so have you seen an instance where all that happens and then one of the two companies has a security incident and they have to navigate that?
Oh yes, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
We have seen that, and it's tough, right? Because when a security incident happens, it doesn't matter which project you're on. It doesn't matter if you're in the middle of enterprise software rollout. It doesn't matter if you're in the middle of a culture shift. It doesn't matter. It's all hands on deck. Make sure that we have the security vulnerability resolved and taken care of, and ensuring that you look backwards to mitigate any of the root cause analysis that is necessary. And that's happened, and those are acceptable, in my opinion. Those are acceptable disruptions on your plan, because if you can't protect your own security with a vulnerability, then you can't build on it, right? You have to make sure that it's resolved.
Yeah, that's a definitely interesting question, AJ. I was wondering when you were going to come back to my world, but yeah, I mean, because we asked this pre going live, how often does it actually impact whether or not the merger is going to go through, or the valuation of the company? How do you take into, because it's kind of tough to, well, at least from my perspective, you probably have a much better handle on this, of how much this is actually going to cost long term if there is an incident. Yeah.
And I think that's what goes into valuation, right? Is okay. So if you think about the 5 guys in a garage situation, they're building out this really cool AI product, and you want to, bolt it on into your product. I think what it's about is understanding, okay, what vulnerabilities are there, so that's your pre-due diligence, and what do you have to build in order to ensure that when it's bolted onto your chassis, that it's not going to open you up to other risks. And whenever you're like, well, that's going to take us, I don't know, $500,000 investment of, development time, or a product or something to be able to protect it, that definitely goes into the cost, and it definitely goes into the consideration, and it degrades EBITDA a bit to be able to make those proper choices. Security infrastructure is really important.